I built something from nothing. 12 years, every decision, every risk, every 3 a.m. phone call when a deal was falling apart and I was the only one who could hold it together. I built it, and then one Tuesday morning I sat in front of a spreadsheet and realized someone had been taking it apart from the inside for years, and the person I trusted most in the world wasn't who I thought. Neither of them were. Here's what happened. My name is Marco. I'm 38 years old. I was born in Hialeah, Florida. If you know Miami, you know Hialeah. If you don't, just picture the part of the city that doesn't make it into the travel magazines. Working class, loud, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knows your mother and your mother knows everyone's business and failure is not really an option because too many people are watching. My father came from Cuba when he was 19 years old, with $40 and a suitcase that had a broken zipper. He spent 30 years working in a warehouse and never once complained about it in my presence. Not once. What he did instead was point at me and say, you're gonna do something with it. I took that seriously. I was not the smartest kid in my class. I was not the most talented. What I was, and I say this without ego, just as a fact, was the most stubborn. I do not stop. It is not in my nature. When something is hard, I push harder, and when something feels impossible, I treat that as a challenge instead of a conclusion. That quality built my business. It also eventually broke my marriage, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I met Diego Fernandez when I was 22. We were both working at a property management company in Coral Gables. Entry-level, miserable pay, the kind of job you take because it gets your foot in the door and you tell yourself it's temporary. We were assigned to the same desk cluster. He was 24, loud where I was quiet, impulsive where I was deliberate, the kind of man who could walk into a room and have everyone laughing within 5 minutes. We were completely different people. We became best friends within a month. I don't know exactly how to explain the friendship, except to say that it worked in the way that certain things work, not because they make logical sense, but because the pieces fit in a way that neither piece could entirely explain. Diego made me loosen up. I made him slow down. Between the two of us, we had something that neither of us had alone. At 26, we quit the property management company on the same day. We started Fernandez Reyes LLC with $40,000 between us, most of it borrowed, a shared office space the size of a large closet in Doral, and an absolute certainty that we were going to make something real. For 12 years, we did exactly that. We were not overnight successes. I want to be clear about that because I think people here built a business and imagine some clean upward line on a graph. It was not a clean line. The first 2 years were genuinely terrifying. There were months where we could not make payroll and had to defer our own salaries. There was a deal in year 3 that nearly bankrupted us. A commercial property in Broward County that went sideways in ways neither of us had anticipated and cost us everything we had made in the previous 18 months. We didn't quit. By year 5, we had 3 projects running simultaneously. By year 8, we had a staff of 22 and had completed developments worth a combined $40 million. By year 10, Diego was driving a Porsche, and I bought a house in Coral Gables. Not the neighborhood where I worked entry level, but the actual neighborhood, the one with the banyan trees and the wide, quiet streets. My mother cried when she saw it. My father, he died the year before we bought it. Heart attack, 6 months after he retired. I think about that more than I probably should. He worked 30 years for a retirement he got 6 months of. I bought that house in part for him, for the version of him that I carry around with me. My wife's name is Elena. I met her when I was 30. She was 28, a real estate attorney. We crossed paths professionally before we crossed paths personally, which meant that by the time we started dating, I already knew she was brilliant and precise and did not accept anything less than exactly what she had negotiated for. I found that attractive. I still find it attractive, which is one of the more complicated things I carry around now. We were married when I was 32. Small wedding, Elena's preference, not mine, but I didn't fight it. 120 people at a venue in Coconut Grove. Diego was my best man. He gave a toast that had the whole room laughing for 4 solid minutes, and then said something at the end that was genuinely beautiful and made Elena cry. She hugged him afterwards for a long time. I thought, I am a lucky man. I had the business, I had the house, I had a wife I respected, and a best friend I trusted, and a city I had built something real in. I was not wrong to feel lucky. I was wrong about almost everything else. The first sign, and I want to be honest about this because I think it matters, was not dramatic. It was small. So small I almost missed it entirely, and in fact, I missed it the first time and only caught it when I went back. It was a Tuesday in October, 14 months ago. Our CFO, a careful, thorough woman named Patricia, who had been with us for 6 years, had flagged a discrepancy in our quarterly reconciliation, a small one, an outgoing transfer of $23,000 to a vendor account that she couldn't match to any project in our current pipeline. She brought it to me because Diego handled vendor relationships and Diego was traveling that week, a site visit in Orlando, and she needed someone to authorize the reconciliation before the end of the quarter. I told her to send me the account details. I looked at them. The vendor was listed as Coastal Consulting Group LLC, a Florida company. Services rendered, project consultation Q3. I did not recognize the name. That was not immediately alarming. We worked with a lot of consultants. Diego managed most of those relationships, and I trusted him to do it. But $23,000 was not a small number, and the timing felt off. We didn't have any active projects in a phase that would typically require outside consultation in Q3. I told Patricia to hold the reconciliation, and I called Diego. He picked up immediately. I asked him about Coastal Consulting Group. He said, without hesitating, without any pause at all, "Yeah, that's the firm I brought in for the Doral project, environmental compliance stuff. I told you about them in August, remember?" I did not remember, but I could also not say with certainty that he hadn't mentioned it. Diego and I talked every day, multiple times a day, about 100 different things. It was entirely possible he had mentioned the consultant in August and I had filed it away without fully registering it. I told Patricia to process the reconciliation. I hung up with Diego and went back to my afternoon. That was the first sign. I missed it. The second sign came 6 weeks later. Another transfer, different vendor name, similar amount. Patricia flagged it again. I called Diego again. He had an explanation again, smooth, immediate, detailed. I told Patricia to process it. The third time, February, 4 months after the first, the amount was $67,000. That one I did not process immediately. That one I sat with. I pulled up our full vendor payment history for the previous 18 months, something I had never done before. That was Diego's domain and I had never had a reason to look at. I trusted him the way you trust someone you have built something with for 12 years. The way you trust someone who was standing next to you when you had $40,000 and a closet office and an idea. I pulled it up and I started reading. And somewhere around the 45th minute of reading, I stopped. I went back to the beginning. I read it again. And then I called Patricia and asked her to come to my office and close the door. Patricia sat across from me. I turned the screen toward her. I said, "Tell me what you see." She looked at it for a long time. When she looked back at me, her expression was the expression of someone who has just understood something they wish they hadn't. She said, "Marco, how long has this been going on?" I said, "That's what I need to find out." Because what I was looking at wasn't just $23,000, wasn't just $67,000. What I was looking at, spread across 18 months of vendor payments to companies I had never heard of, was $2.3 million. Gone. And I had signed off on every single transfer without knowing. I want to tell you what $2.3 million means to a business like ours. It's not nothing, obviously. It's not nothing. It's $2.3 million. But I also want you to understand the context, because I think people hear a number like that and assume the company is destroyed. It wasn't. We were healthy enough that the bleeding had been, I don't want to say unnoticeable, because Patricia noticed it, but manageable enough that it hadn't triggered any alarm that reached my desk until now, which told me something. It told me this had been done carefully. Whoever structured these payments knew our books well enough to keep each individual transaction below the threshold that would automatically flag for review.
knew our vendor payment patterns well enough to create fake companies that looked plausible at a glance, knew our reconciliation schedule well enough to time the transfers accordingly. This was not impulsive. This was architectural. I sent Patricia home at 7 that evening, and I stayed in the office alone until almost midnight going through everything. 12 years of financials. I wasn't looking at all of it. I was looking specifically at vendor payments, consultant fees, any outgoing transfer that didn't have a corresponding project deliverable attached. By midnight, I had found $2.3 million across 31 separate transactions spanning not 18 months, 3 years. 3 years of systematic extraction from our company. I sat in my office on the 14th floor of a building in Brickell with Miami glittering outside the window, and I thought about Diego. 12 years. I thought about the closet office in Doral, the month we couldn't make payroll, the Broward County deal that nearly finished us, the moment in year 5 when our first major project closed and we sat in his car in a parking garage, and I think both of us cried a little, though neither of us has ever admitted that out loud. I thought about his toast at my wedding, and then I thought about the fact that every single one of those 31 transactions had been initiated from his login credentials, not mine. His. I went home at midnight. Elena was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a moment and looked at her, and then I went to the guest room and lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling until 4 in the morning. The next day, I did not call Diego. I called a forensic accountant named Robert Chen, who had been recommended to me 2 years earlier by our business attorney, in the context of, ironically, protecting ourselves from this exact kind of fraud. I told Robert I needed a full forensic audit of our vendor payment history going back 4 years. I needed it done quietly, without involving our internal finance team beyond Patricia, and I needed it as fast as he could move. He said 2 weeks. He came back in 11 days. The number had grown. Not 2.3 million, 3.8 million. 31 transactions I had found. Robert found 56. He sat across from me in my office with his report, and he walked me through it with the particular careful neutrality of someone delivering information they know is going to cause damage. Every transaction, every shell company, the structure of it, 4 different LLCs, all registered in Florida, all with legitimate-looking websites and registered agents, all created within the 18 months before the payments to them began. Someone had set this up methodically. Someone who understood corporate structure, who understood how to create entities that looked real, who understood Florida LLC law well enough to do it cleanly. I asked Robert, could Diego have set this up himself? Robert looked at me carefully. The financial mechanics, yes, he said. Diego understands the payment systems well enough to execute the transfers, but the legal structure of these entities, the LLCs, the registered agents, the way they're insulated from each other, that required someone with specific legal knowledge. I looked at him. What kind of legal knowledge? I asked. Corporate, Robert said. Real estate corporate specifically. Whoever set these up knew exactly how Florida LLC law works and how to use it to create distance between the entities and the people behind them. I sat with that. Corporate real estate law. I knew one person in my life who specialized in corporate real estate law. I knew her very well. I want to tell you that I immediately rejected the thought, that my mind went there and I shut the door on it firmly because it was insane. It was impossible. It was the kind of thing that doesn't happen in real life and certainly doesn't happen to you. But I didn't shut the door. I sat in my office after Robert left and I let the thought be there. Elena, my wife of 6 years, the woman who negotiated our prenuptial agreement, her idea, not mine, which at the time I had found practical and now felt like something else entirely. The woman who knew our business structure because she had helped create it, who reviewed partnership agreements, vendor contracts, the articles of incorporation for Fernandez Reyes Development, who had, 3 years ago, helped Diego set up a personal LLC for a side consulting project he had mentioned wanting to pursue. I had forgotten about that until this moment. I picked up my phone. I did not call Diego. I opened my laptop instead. Florida's Division of Corporations has a public search database. You can look up any registered LLC in the state, the registered agent, the date of formation, the address on file. I searched for Diego's personal LLC first, the one Elena had helped him set up. It came up immediately. Fernandez Consulting Group, LLC. Formed 3 years ago. Registered agent, a law firm in Coral Gables. I looked at the address on file for the registered agent. I recognized it. It was Elena's firm. I sat with that for a moment. Then I searched for the 4 shell companies Robert had identified in his report. The first one, registered agent, different firm, no connection. The second one, same. The third one, I stopped. The third shell company's registered agent was listed as an individual rather than a firm. The name was Elena Maria Reyes. My wife's name before we married was Elena Maria Reyes. She had kept it professionally. Her firm knew her as Elena Reyes. All her bar association registrations, her professional licenses, Elena Reyes. I stared at her name on that screen for a long time. Then I searched the fourth company. Same registered agent, Elena Maria Reyes. 2 of the 4 shell companies that had received $3.8 million of my company's money over 3 years had been registered by my wife. I closed the laptop. I sat in my office. Outside the window, Miami was doing what Miami does in the middle of a Tuesday, loud and bright and completely indifferent to the fact that everything I thought I knew about my life had just reorganized itself into something unrecognizable. I thought about Diego's toast at my wedding. I thought about Elena hugging him afterward, for a long time.
I drove home that evening, at the normal time. I came through the door the normal way. Elena was in the kitchen, making dinner. She looked up when I came in and smiled and asked how my day was. And I said, "Good, busy, you know how it is." I kissed her on the cheek. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I thought, how long? How long had they been doing this? And then a worse question. A question I had been avoiding all day. Because once you ask it, you cannot unask it. How long had they been everything else? Because $3.8 million doesn't happen between a business partner and a wife who are simply colleagues. $3.8 million happens between 2 people who trust each other completely. The way you trust someone you are very, very close to. I gave myself 3 days. 3 days of coming home at normal time, eating dinner at the kitchen table, asking Elena about her day and listening to her answer and responding like a man who didn't know what he knew. 3 days of lying in the dark next to her at night, staring at the ceiling while she slept. I don't know if that makes me calculated or just scared. Probably both. I needed information before I needed confrontation. I had learned that much from building a business. You don't walk into a negotiation without knowing what the other side is holding. You don't make a move until you understand the board. So I spent those 3 days understanding the board. I called my business attorney on day 1, a man named Gerald Park, who had represented Fernandez Reyes since year 3. I trusted him completely. He was one of the few people outside the company who knew our financials in detail. I told him what Roberto had found. I told him about the shell companies. I told him about Elena's name on the registration documents. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Gerald said, "Marco, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not move any money. Do not change any passwords. Do not confront them yet. Can you do that?" I said I could. "I'm going to make some calls," he said. "Give me 24 hours. Gerald called back in 18. He had spoken to a colleague who specialized in business fraud litigation. He had also, quietly, carefully, run the 4 shell companies through some additional searches that Roberto hadn't done. What he found was this. The 4 LLCs had been receiving payments from our company for 3 years, but they had not been sitting on that money. The money had been moving, transferred out of the LLCs into a series of personal accounts within days of each deposit.
cleaned, dispersed, made difficult to trace. Not impossible, though. Gerald's colleague had traced $1.2 million to an account in Elena's name, a personal account I didn't know existed, not our joint account, not her business account, a third account at a different bank registered to her maiden name, Elena Maria Reyes. $1.2 million, sitting in an account in a name she technically never legally stopped using. The remaining $2.6 million, Gerald's colleague was still working on it, but the early indicators suggested it had moved into accounts connected to Diego, some domestic, at least one offshore. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my own building when Gerald told me all of this, and I just breathed, in and out, for probably 5 minutes, just breathing. Then I made the question I had been not asking for 3 days. Gerald, how long do you think this has been going on? Not the money, the other thing. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Marco, how long? I said. Another pause. The first LLC was formed 4 years ago, he said carefully. 3 months after you and Elena got married. 3 months after my wedding. Diego had given a toast. Elena had hugged him for a long time. I thanked Gerald and hung up. I sat in that parking garage for a while longer, and I made a decision. I was not going to confront them separately. I was not going to call Diego and give him time to warn Elena or move money or construct a story. I was not going to tip my hand in any direction before I was ready. I was going to do this once, completely, when I had everything in place. It took 9 more days. 9 days of normal dinners and normal conversations, and lying in the dark next to my wife while my attorney and a forensic accountant and a fraud litigation specialist built a case around what she and my best friend had done to my company and my marriage simultaneously for 4 years. 9 days. I got very good at the performance of normal. Maybe too good. That thought has occurred to me since. On the 10th day, Gerald called and said, "We're ready." That morning, I got up at 6 like always, made coffee like always. Elena was still asleep. I stood in the kitchen of the house in Coral Gables that I had bought in part in honor of my father, and I drank my coffee, and I looked out the window at the banyan tree in the front yard, and I thought about him. He used to say, "Marco, the only thing a man truly owns is how he handles the moment when everything goes wrong." I thought about that for a long time standing at that window. Then I picked up my phone and I sent Diego a text. I said, "Need you in the office by 9. Important vendor issue, need both of us on it before it goes any further." He replied in 4 minutes. "On my way. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I wrote back. "Just need to sort something out." I got to the office at 8. Gerald was already there, Roberto, Chen, Gerald's litigation colleague, a woman named Sandra who had the particular stillness of someone who has sat across from a lot of people in very difficult moments and is no longer surprised by any of it. And a representative from the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, because what Diego and Elena had done was not just a civil matter, it was wire fraud. It was a felony. Diego arrived at 9:02. He came through the door the way he always came through the door, easy, unhurried, the particular confidence of a man who has never once in 12 years had reason to believe that walking into this office was anything other than safe. He saw the room, he stopped. He looked at Gerald, at Roberto, at Sandra, at the state attorney's representative, and then he looked at me. And I watched his face do something I had never seen it do in 12 years of knowing him. It collapsed. Not dramatically, not all at once, more like something went out of it. The ease, the confidence, the particular aliveness that had always been the most Diego thing about Diego. It just left in about 3 seconds, and what was underneath was something smaller and older and frightened. I had prepared something to say. Gerald had actually suggested I let him do the talking. Let the attorneys handle it. Keep it professional. Don't make it personal. I couldn't do that. I looked at Diego across the conference table and I said, 12 years. That was all. Just those 2 words. He looked at the table. He didn't say anything. Sandra took over from there. She walked him through what we had found. Every transaction, every LLC, every account, the offshore movement, the timeline, all of it laid out on the table in front of him in printed documents that Roberto had organized with the particular thoroughness of a man who takes his work seriously. Diego's attorney, who had been called and arrived by 9:15, which told me Diego was more prepared for this day than he let on, stopped him from saying anything substantive. Professional advice, smart advice. But at one point, Diego looked up. He looked at me directly and he said just this, just 4 words before his attorney put a hand on his arm. She came to me. She came to me. I have turned those 4 words over in my mind every day since. Because Diego was taken out of that conference room by the state attorney's representative 40 minutes later, and I drove home, and Elena was in the kitchen, and she looked up when I came in, and for the first time in 10 days, I didn't perform normal. I put my keys on the counter. I looked at my wife, and I said, "He told me you came to him first." The kitchen went very quiet, and the expression on Elena's face told me everything I needed to know. Elena didn't deny it. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. There was no argument, no version of events where she tried to convince me that what I knew wasn't what I knew. She stood in our kitchen in Coral Gables and she looked at me, and something in her face just settled, like a decision being made, like a person choosing in the final moment to stop carrying something. She said, "How much do you know?" I said, "All of it." She nodded. She sat down at the kitchen table, and she talked for 2 hours. I am not going to tell you everything she said. Some of it is still part of an ongoing legal process, and my attorney has been clear about what I can and cannot discuss publicly. But I will tell you the shape of it, because I think the shape matters. She and Diego had been involved for 3 years. It had started, she said this carefully, watching my face, it had started approximately 8 months into our marriage. A work overlap, a late night, the kind of thing that she said happened before she had fully decided to let it happen. I don't know what to do with that framing. I have thought about it a lot. I'm still thinking about it. The money had been her idea. That was the part that landed hardest, not the affair. I had suspected that from the moment I saw Diego's face in the conference room. But the money, the 4 LLCs, the offshore accounts, the 3 years of systematic extraction from the company I had built, that had been Elena's architecture. She was the corporate real estate attorney. She knew how to build the structures. She knew how to make them look legitimate. She had used the knowledge she had acquired helping us grow the business to quietly dismantle it from the inside. She said she had a plan, that they were going to leave together, that the money was supposed to be a foundation for whatever came next, a life somewhere else. I asked her, where? She said, it doesn't matter now. She was right. It didn't. I left the house that evening and stayed at a hotel in Brickell for 3 weeks while the legal situation developed. Gerald managed most of it. What I can tell you without going into protected details is that both Diego and Elena faced criminal charges. The state attorney's office moved quickly. Wire fraud cases with this level of documentation tend to go. A forensic trail that Robert and Sandra had built over those 9 days was apparently unusually complete. Diego took a plea. Elena's case is still moving through the courts. Her attorney is good. She hired someone very good. And these things take time. I have made my peace with the timeline. What I have not made my peace with, and maybe never will, is a particular memory from our wedding. Her standing at the altar. The way she looked at me. I have gone over that moment so many times looking for something I missed, some flicker of calculation beneath the warmth, some sign that the woman standing there was already the woman who would spend the next 3 years helping her lover take my company apart piece by piece. I don't find it, And I don't know if that means I was completely blind or if it means that in that moment, on that day, she was genuinely present, genuinely there. People are not simple. Even the people who do terrible things are not entirely the terrible things they do. I have had to learn to hold that without it destroying me. The business survived. That surprised me almost more than anything else about this whole situation. We lost $3.8 million and the managing partner of 12 years, and somehow Fernandez Reyes Development is still standing. Patricia held things together in those first chaotic weeks in a way I will never be able to fully repay. We brought in an interim CFO. We restructured. We lost 2 projects we were close to closing because the news got out. It always gets out. And 2 clients decided. Elena didn't deny it. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. There was no argument, no version of events where she tried to convince me that what I knew wasn't what I knew. She stood in our kitchen in Coral Gables and she looked at me, and something in her face just settled, like a decision being made, like a person choosing in the final moment to stop carrying something. She said, "How much do you know?" I said, "All of it." She nodded. She sat down at the kitchen table, and she talked for 2 hours. I am not going to tell you everything she said. Some of it is still part of an ongoing legal process, and my attorney has been clear about what I can and cannot discuss publicly. But I will tell you the shape of it, because I think the shape matters. She and Diego had been involved for 3 years. It had started, she said this carefully, watching my face, it had started approximately 8 months into our marriage. A work overlap, a late night, the kind of thing that she said happened before she had fully decided to let it happen. I don't know what to do with that framing. I have thought about it a lot. I'm still thinking about it. The money had been her idea. That was the part that landed hardest, not the affair. I had suspected that from the moment I saw Diego's face in the conference room. But the money, the 4 LLCs, the offshore accounts, the 3 years of systematic extraction from the company I had built, that had been Elena's architecture. She was the corporate real estate attorney. She knew how to build the structures. She knew how to make them look legitimate. She had used the knowledge she had acquired helping us grow the business to quietly dismantle it from the inside. She said she had a plan, that they were going to leave together, that the money was supposed to be a foundation for whatever came next, a life somewhere else. I asked her, where? She said, it doesn't matter now. She was right. It didn't. I left the house that evening and stayed at a hotel in Brickell for 3 weeks while the legal situation developed. Gerald managed most of it. What I can tell you without going into protected details is that both Diego and Elena faced criminal charges. The state attorney's office moved quickly. Wire fraud cases with this level of documentation tend to go. A forensic trail that Robert and Sandra had built over those 9 days was apparently unusually complete. Diego took a plea. Elena's case is still moving through the courts. Her attorney is good. She hired someone very good. And these things take time. I have made my peace with the timeline. What I have not made my peace with, and maybe never will, is a particular memory from our wedding. Her standing at the altar. The way she looked at me. I have gone over that moment so many times looking for something I missed, some flicker of calculation beneath the warmth, some sign that the woman standing there was already the woman who would spend the next 3 years helping her lover take my company apart piece by piece. I don't find it. And I don't know if that means I was completely blind or if it means that in that moment, on that day, she was genuinely present, genuinely there. People are not simple. Even the people who do terrible things are not entirely the terrible things they do. I have had to learn to hold that without it destroying me. The business survived. That surprised me almost more than anything else about this whole situation. We lost $3.8 million and the managing partner of 12 years, and somehow Fernandez Reyes Development is still standing. Patricia held things together in those first chaotic weeks in a way I will never be able to fully repay. We brought in an interim CFO. We restructured. We lost 2 projects we were close to closing because the news got out. It always gets out. And 2 clients decided the instability was too much. We kept the rest. I kept the rest. I am now the sole principal of a company I built with someone I can no longer speak to. I sit in the same office. I look out the same window at the same Miami skyline. Some days that feels like resilience. Some days it feels like stubbornness. Most days I think it is both, and I have stopped trying to separate them. The house in Coral Gables sold 4 months ago. I couldn't stay there either. Too many dinners at that kitchen table. Too many mornings at that window with the banyan tree. I have an apartment in Brickell now. Smaller, high floor. I can see the water from the living room if I stand at a specific angle near the window, which I do every morning while I drink my coffee. My mother calls every Sunday. She doesn't ask about Elena or Diego anymore. She asks about the business, about whether I'm eating, and about the church. I say, I'm working on it. She accepts that. My father would have had something to say about all of this, something direct, and probably uncomfortable, and almost certainly right. He had a way of reducing things to their essential truth that I used to find embarrassing when I was younger, and now would give almost anything to have access to. What I think he would have said is that the measure of a man is not what he builds, it's what he rebuilds. I'm working on that. I'm 40 stories up in a building in Brickell, Florida, looking at the water at 6 in the morning, and I am working on that. I am my father's son after all. I do not stop. That's the whole story, or the part I'm ready to tell. I told you at the beginning, I built something from nothing. 12 years, every decision, every risk. Turns out the biggest risk wasn't the bad deal in year 3. Wasn't the months we couldn't make payroll. It was the people I let closest to what I built. The ones I never thought to protect myself from. If you've ever trusted someone completely, you know exactly what I mean. Thanks for listening.